Hello and welcome to another exciting video episode of The Greatest Record Ever Made. I'm Carl Caffarelli. I'm the co-host of This is Rock and Roll Radio with Dana and Carl, heard every Sunday night from 9 to midnight Eastern, here in Syracuse on Spark, WSPJ 103.3, 93.7 FM, and on the web at sparksyracuse.org. I'm also a writer. I'm working on a book called The Greatest Record Ever Made, Volume 1, dedicated to the notion that an infinite number of songs can each be the greatest record ever made as long as they take turns. And, records, turns, that's what they do. Actually 2 weeks ago, we took Thanksgiving week off from video blogging, but 2 weeks ago, we were talking about the Sex Pistols and God Save the Queen. And we closed that video by saying that we were going to move from the Sex Pistols, a controversial threat to the recorded status quo of decorum, into what I feel was the single greatest threat to decorum in the history of rock and roll, of 20th century pop music, and that would be Elvis Presley, the king. So this week's spotlight on the greatest record ever made falls on Heartbreak Hotel. Elvis was called the king. I refer to him as King Elvis I. And it's important to note that he never accepted that description for himself. It's something that was bestowed upon him by people who understood how important he was, how earth-shattering his impact was over the course of decades. I believe he's certainly one of the two most important individual figures in rock and roll music, in the history of rock and roll, him and Chuck Berry. I don't think there's anyone who can challenge their sheer impact, their importance. Not the Beatles. As important, as all-encompassing as the Beatles' impact was and remains, no one can compare to Chuck Berry and Elvis. Not Bob Dylan, not Led Zeppelin, not Hendrix, not Carole King, not the Ramones, not the Sex Pistols. There's no one else in that category. And I would further say that Elvis is probably the single most important figure in modern popular culture. I really don't think there's anyone who can challenge that. Marilyn Monroe, maybe. I think it's Elvis. I really don't think that there's a runner-up to that. It's Elvis. It's King Elvis I. And it's odd that I look back from when I was an adolescent and young teen in the 70s and remember that I did not think that at all at the time. When I was a kid, I thought Elvis was a joke. He was not relevant to me at all. He was somebody that I saw parodied by comedians and talk shows and everything like that, and I remember 1973 or 74, whenever it was, traveling with my family from the Panhandle in Florida to Southwest Missouri and stopping in Memphis for the night, and passing by Graceland and figuring, well, what's the big deal? And then a little bit later on, getting to Southwest Missouri, that's where my grandparents lived, and conspiring with my cousin Mark to do a comedy cassette audio, KLOD. It was Dana's idea. It was Mark's idea, to do a parody of a radio show, and that included a talk show, a variety show parody, like a Johnny Carson parody that I called the Homer Hardblast Show, with his sidekick Seymour Sapopchi. And one of the guests was Elvis, coming out and saying, "Aloha from Hawaii. Thank you very much. I just want to be your." To me, it was broad parody and obvious. I was like 13, 14 years old, so forgive me for being 13, 14 years old. I didn't understand the importance of Elvis. I didn't understand the impact of Elvis, and I certainly didn't understand the value of Elvis. Also kind of odd in retrospect, because as an AM radio listener, I had heard Burnin' Love on WOLF AM in the early 70s, and it's a great record. I think I knew that then. I don't know why I couldn't quite jump to that. And I also remember Steamroller Blues. I'm a steamroller, baby. I like to roll all over you. But I didn't get it. I did not get it at that age. And it's odd that since comedy defined my perception of Elvis, I guess it's fitting that comedy transformed it. Andy Kaufman, who I knew from some late night summer comedy replacement show that was on, and then later on it was on Saturday Night Live a couple of times. But I remember seeing him on Johnny Carson doing his familiar "Thank you very much, thank you very much," his familiar immigrant parody, and then switching into doing Elvis, it wasn't even a parody of Elvis, it was a tribute, and I was just transfixed because for that brief moment he became Elvis. And I know it's weird, but when I saw him do that on TV, all of a sudden I got it. I understood. I appreciated Elvis in a way that I had never had before. I can't apologize for my weird route to getting there. But I got there. In the summer of 1977, Elvis was actually going to be making his second ever appearance live in concert in Syracuse. And I wasn't going to go. I hadn't quite gotten to the point that I was interested in seeing an Elvis show. Plus, I was, 17 on my way to college. I wasn't really going to a lot of concerts. I didn't have any money. And I was listening to WOUR-FM out of Utica, and they played Heartbreak Hotel. I thought, oh, cool, I like this song. By then, I had evolved to the point where I appreciated what a great record Heartbreak Hotel was. And then they played another Elvis song. Oh, because he's coming to town, I'm sure. Then another Elvis song. Then another Elvis song. And then I realized that the king had left the building. Elvis had left the building. After Elvis's death, I had the opportunity, because of the sudden upsurge in interest in the departed king, to see the 1968 comeback special and to see the movie Loving You. And that deepened my appreciation for Elvis. I didn't own an awful lot of Elvis vinyl. I don't think I actually own any right now. I had two 45s that I had inherited from a family friend. And in the early 80s, I bought a double album best of set. Oddly enough, I remember showing them to a friend at my apartment, that I had this new double album Elvis set on swirly colored vinyl. At the same time that I had also gotten used copies of the Roxy Music debut album and the New York Dolls debut album, and also a brand new Lords of the New Church debut album. So Elvis, the Lords of the New Church, New York Dolls, Roxy Music. Welcome to my world. This is the world of the greatest record ever made. But I got it. It took me a while. I never developed much appreciation for Vegas Elvis. I know that a lot of those who are grudgingly conceding that Elvis was important stick just to the Sun records, which I have on CD, his early sides, and those are fantastic. But he did a lot of stuff that was fantastic and popular, starting with Heartbreak Hotel. I think his debut RCA Records single. Somebody will correct me if I'm wrong. And some of those hits through the 50s and into the 60s remain fantastic. Even into the 70s, Burning Love is a fantastic single. I wonder if, in retrospect, if as a kid in the 70s, I would have been faster to appreciate Elvis if I'd known of his comic book connection. Elvis was originally a blonde-haired kid who darkened his hair, and some say, plausibly, that he did it to emulate his favorite comic book superhero, Captain Marvel Jr. Yeah, tell me that's not Elvis. That's Elvis. Let's look on ahead here. And here. And like here. That'll be the last example. V for victory. I think it's V for Viva Las Vegas. Thank you very much. And that certainly influenced his garb in the Vegas era too, the cape and the jumpsuit and all that. That's I don't think it's incorrect to speculate that Elvis was influenced by Captain Marvel Jr. And if I'd known that in the 70s, maybe I would have gotten to Elvis faster than I did. But I got there. Amazing stuff. Heartbreak Hotel, in the book, I described as the recorded equivalent of the shot heard round the world. It was not the first rock and roll hit record. That would be Rock Around the Clock by Bill Haley and his Comets. But it was the one that mattered, more so than the Sun record sides, as fantastic as those were. Heartbreak Hotel changed the world. You have before that, and you have after that. What better description can there be of the greatest record ever made? Before that, and then everything changed. Sun Records owner Sam Phillips said famously that if he could find a white man who could sing like a black man convincingly, he could make $1 million. And that was Elvis Presley. Thank you for joining us here on The Greatest Record Ever Made. Next week, we're going to return to a tangent discussion of Elvis Presley with a song called Hound Dog, you may know, but we're going to talk about the forgotten original by Big Mama Thornton. One of the few examples I can name where someone did a song associated with Elvis better than Elvis did. There aren't a lot of selections like that. If you look below, you can see options to support, to subscribe, and to tip. The chapter on the book about Heartbreak Hotel is completed, but it is not available for public view. It's only available to my private patrons. There's a link below if you want to become a patron for as little as $2 a month. Then you have access to the privately posted chapters from the book. I post one a month that I do not post publicly for at least 30 days thereafter, and most of them probably not until the book is published and it'll be available in book form. Right now, well, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us on The Greatest Record Ever Made.